All right, well, thank you and welcome to Music Monday of the Ozarks. Thank you, Chris, for this opportunity to introduce to you Marideth Sisco. That's not mine. It is my ring, though. It's a surprise that I am here to introduce Merideth, because we're missing one of our valued members, Kitty Ledbetter, who was going to do this, but I'm privileged to be the person to tell you a little bit about our guest tonight. You might hear her, I hope you do, once a month on KSMU with a program that she hosts and creates and originates called These Ozark Hills, great storytelling program that is on KSMU once a month, morning edition, I think, and all things considered both. She is a longtime friend of mine for many, many years. Listener of my program on KSMU, Seldom Heard Music, and I'm a big fan of hers as well. She was part of the music, coordination of the music for a film that was nominated for Best Film, an Oscar for Best Film, and that was Winter's Bone. Yes, and Bo Brown here too. Four nominations in total, 4 Oscar nominations for Winter's Bone. And our guest tonight was part of coordinating all that. She opened that film by singing the Missouri Waltz.
Yeah.
And what a fine opening and a fine film it was.
I have a story about it, too. So.
Great. Because you better have a story about it. So, without further ado, and being unprepared to say much more, a Quill Award winner from the Missouri Writers
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So, that says a lot as well. So, please get ready to clap again for our guest, Marideth Sisco.
Thank you all. Well, I thought maybe I'd just have you ask me questions, but I probably should say a few things first. Let me tell the story about the Missouri Waltz. When this little film came to the Ozarks and they were putting it together, I heard about it. I heard that the budget for the whole thing was $2 million, which for movies is nothing. And it was going to be about the Ozarks, and what could you say? And then they asked me if I would come and sing a few pieces for them. And I said, well, yeah, sure, I would. And they paid me $100 for coming to sing and $100 for putting the band together. And none of us knew who Jennifer Lawrence was. You know, this kid from Kentucky, with an attitude. But so I heard that I was going to be doing this on March the 19th of 2009, and right the week before it was supposed to happen, I got a call from my doctor. I'd gone and had some tests done, and he said there were some bad cells they found, and they're going to have to do surgery. I said, okay. Well, when were you going to do that? And he said, well, we got it down for March the 19th. I said, I can't do it. He said, what do you mean you can't do it? I said, I'm in a movie. I can't do it. He said, well, when can you do it? I said, well, I can do it the next week, you know. So I went out there, drove in the middle of nowhere, in somewhere east of Forsyth. I think as the crow flies, it was 7 miles, but the drive was 25. You know that road, right? So I went and sang. Bo wasn't in it at that point because they were looking for people. They had this whole lineup of people they wanted to be in my band, and I took a look at the lineup, and I said, well, did you think maybe you might want a guitar player in there someplace? Oh, well, yeah. Well, do you know one? Yeah, I do. So I hauled in some Jim and Kim Lansford from over at Reed Springs came over, and Dennis Kreider came from West Plains, and we got it all put together. And the only people that we kept were Billy Ward, who was the fiddler, and other than being too drunk to play, he looked the part. He kind of acted the part, you know. And then this 16-year-old kid whose name was, what was it? JD, I don't know. He was 16, thought the world of himself. He was a good banjo player. But yeah, you know that kid. He's older now. I'm sure he still thinks the world of himself. But my main problem was that he kept on making really horribly racist jokes in front of this crew that was not white. If your eyes could see, well, anyway. So I do my gig there, and I go home and do the surgery. I'm recovering from the surgery. It was kind of grim. I get a phone call, and they said, what's the Missouri Waltz sound like? I said, you mean the original? Yeah, it's really racist. Oh, could you fix it? Maybe. So I took out all the pickaninnies and the other weird little pieces, and I sung it in my hi, Kitty. So I sang it in my little recorder, sent it to them. They said, oh, yeah, that'll do. And it being a little recorder with limited space, I erased it. And so the summer went on, and then they called and they said, well, we need a hymn. And I said, well, what kind of a hymn? They said, well, you know, none of that sin and redemption stuff, you know, like the great mystery, that kind of hymn. Well, okay, how about Farther Along? Never heard of it. You've never heard Farther Along? Meredith, we're Jewish. Well, no, you wouldn't have heard it. Okay, I'll send that right to you. So I recorded it and sent it to them. They liked it, but they didn't like the old-time church piano. They wanted something a little more romantic. So I got Dennis Kreider to play the guitar, and we did it. And so that satisfied them. And then we got up to November, and it was like 2 weeks before Sundance, and we were supposed to, no, come in. We were supposed to go to Sundance and present this film. And this guy with an odd accent that I couldn't begin to duplicate called me up, and he said, I need the WAV file for Missouri Waltz. I said, I threw that away a long time ago. That's bad. Why is it bad? It starts the movie. Oh, God, okay. So I went in the studio, recorded it 5 times, could never match that original voice because I just out of the hospital, I didn't have any air, I sounded 100 years old, I couldn't match it. And so they ended up using that little MP3 file, that little file that's that wide, to start the movie. So when you see the movie and you hear crickets and birds and the wind blowing, none of that was there. They put it in so it would fill up the file so it wouldn't hiss. I mean, it worked out, but you know. Well, let's go back a ways before that. I was born in Butterfield in Berry County, strawberry capital of the world. And when I come in, make yourself at home. When I grew up there, that was a world so different than this one that you wouldn't recognize yourself in it. We lived in this town, this building that had been the town hotel, which, as you know, is pronounced hotel. We lived at the hotel. And we got our water across the street from a faucet outside the well house of our uppity neighbors who had a well and and all manner of things. And so I grew up without a telephone until we were, what was it, 14, 15 before we had a telephone. Same year we got a bathroom. Up until then it was wash tub and an outhouse. And that was okay in July and not nearly as okay in December or February. But, yep. Wasn't me either. So I grew up, we had a kerosene, I don't know if you've seen one of these, we had a kerosene cook stove that had like lamp chimneys up for the burners. And you'd have to take them out every once in a while to trim them out so they didn't smoke. And that's how we fixed our meals. And one day that kerosene stove malfunctioned, and my grandmother got hold of my cousin Davy, who happened to be passing by, and made him go out in the back porch and rummage around, and by golly, if he didn't pull out a tiny little laundry stove, set it out in the backyard, threw some wood in there, and cooked us breakfast. So I was not accustomed to the finer things in life. But my dad was a very smart man, but he quit school in the 10th grade to go to work. And we were pretty poor until my cousin, Martin, graduated from business college here in Springfield, Drawn's Business College. And she heard from her uncle, who had gone to the West Coast, that there was this new secret government thing where they were hiring people just right and left, and they needed secretaries really bad. And she was just out of Springfield Business College, and the biggest wage she was ever going to get was $35 a week, and there they were paying $50. She got on a bus. She went to Washington State, applied, got the job, and then wrote home and said, hey, they're hiring welders and electricians, but you have to have a union card. Well, it wasn't a prayer that my dad was going to have a union card, except Ted Barker, who graduated from Butterfield High School just the year before, had gone to Idaho and gotten a job as a union agent for the electrical workers. And my dad wrote to him and said, Ted, could you get me a card? He said, sure, Paul, come on up. He went up on the bus to Twin Falls, Idaho, bought a union card from Ted, and went to Washington, applied for a job. They said, well, your credentials look good, but we're going to have to do a security clearance. And he thought, I'm dead. I'm at least going to jail. But they sent the FBI down to Butterfield with a picture of him. Walked into the cafe and said, you know this guy? And they said, yeah, it's Paul Sisco. That was it. They just wanted to make sure he wasn't a Russian, you know. So off we went to Washington State. And then my dad had the same temper that I do, and he didn't realize, as I did from watching him kill himself over this temper, because he just couldn't not react. So I learned to not react, and I'm still alive. I have the same heart he had, but his didn't last him very long. But we were at Washington until he smarted off to the foreman and got fired. But he was a union worker, and he'd called the union office. They said, where's the job? They said, Kalispell, Montana, aluminum factory. Wire it. We hooked our 29-foot Fleetwood house trailer, built in Los Angeles. Didn't have that much insulation anywhere. Drove it to Montana. Didn't have the money to buy chains, so when they put up a roadblock, we just ran it with our little 29-foot trailer behind this little 1950 Army surplus Ford that we paid $50 for, and drove to Kalispell, Montana. Lived to tell about it. Got there, it was February, about 3 feet of snow on the ground, and the little Ford was getting 4 miles to the gallon by then. It was just on its very last legs. But we were there for a while. Then he smarted off to the foreman, and off we went to the Dalles, Oregon, and then on down to San Leandro, and then, God, where was? Oh, New Mexico someplace. And then back to Sacramento, and then to Angel's Camp that Mark Twain wrote about, the jumping frogs, you know. Went up there and worked for a while on a cement plant. And then went back to Sacramento, and I was just about to start into the 8th grade. And I went to a summer meeting of the school and saw the students I was going to have to go to school with, and I went home, and I ain't going to school here. I am not. Those kids are bigger than me, and they're meaner than me, and they don't even speak the same language as me. I ain't doing it. Well, at that same time, my grandmother, who had raised 6 kids, ended up with nothing. She kept being passed around from one kid to the next, so she didn't have a place to live. Here to there to here. And they said, you know, if we just had somebody who could live with her, she could live at the hotel. And I said, I'll live at the hotel. So I went back to Butterfield, where I'd started at 1st grade, and ended up in Cassville for high school. And at the end of that, I got a music scholarship to Missouri Valley College in Marshall, Missouri. That was an experience. It's a little Presbyterian college. It's probably a pretty good college, but basically the boys there go there to play football and get a business degree. The girls go there to get a boy. And I wasn't interested in getting either one. I just wanted to do music, and the music teacher was good, but after the first year, I just couldn't take those people anymore. And so I came home, said I didn't want to go to college, and they said, well, you'll be sorry if you don't, because you're just going to end up here. And I mean, you know, we like ending up here, but we've been places, and then we're here, but you're just going to end up here. I thought about that for a while. Got a job at the drugstore, being a soda jerk. Thought about that a little longer, and by December I was ready to go back to school. So I applied at MSU, and they let me in. And I was there and studying and having a good time and studying and mostly passing my courses by okay. I did okay. And then they wanted me to fill out a degree program for what I was going to do with music, and so I filled it out. I wanted to learn orchestration and conducting and composition and, you know, get right into it. They said, you're kidding. You can't make a living in any of those things. You're a woman. You're going to be in music education. Now go home and fill those papers out right. I went home, went to a party that Friday night, and there was a fellow who had quit school and was going to try his fortune in California and was looking for somebody to ride with him. And I went, I'll do it. So I went to California and tried to be in the music business. And I was out there 10 years altogether. And most of the time I was playing music with different people and had a band or two. And finally got it after years. I finally got it that in order to be a female music star, you had to be prettier than I was, or else you couldn't be out front. If you're going to be in music and be a woman, then you were going to be in the back and you were going to play whatever they told you to play. And that just didn't sound like any fun at all. I thought, well, no, I don't think I will. So I got my 12-string guitar, started playing around the place, you know, getting a little bit of recognition, and picked up a couple of other singers, and we did some gigs and got some recognition. And then, well, I forgot something. Back in 1959, on a Friday the 13th, 13 of us went on a hayride just for fun. and ran into some road construction where there was loose gravel at the edge of the road, and the truck got caught in the gravel and did one of these things where it went sideways, and then the whole thing just kind of tipped over and dropped us down this 15-foot embankment and then fell on us. Nobody died, but boy, a bunch of us got really hurt. And my hurt was I broke my collarbone and my elbow. And I didn't think that was going to be a problem, except that when I broke my elbow, it chipped off of it and wiggled its way into that joint. And that would have been fine, except I started playing 12-string guitar. And all those muscles built up and pushed that little chip right into the nerve and sliced it. And by the time they figured out what it was too late to do much about it, but they tried. They operated on it. But in the meantime, I got to the point where I couldn't play. And I didn't have a way to make a living. And I worked a few jobs in publishing, and that worked. I got a good job in San Francisco, textbook publisher. I edited Carl Sagan's first book. Nobody knew who the hell he was, but boy, it was an interesting piece. But in the middle of all that, my father died, and I had to go home, and I got him buried. Then my mother decided that she was going to come back to California with me, because back in the war, when I was an eensy babe, my dad got in trouble. He heard I was born, thought my mother might need some support, and he just jumped on a train and came home. But he was on leave from a ship that was in the Pacific, for God's sake. And it was a bad idea, So when he went back, they told him he had to go back. He really did have to face up to it. So he went back, and they put him in the brig. So my mother went to California so she could be next to him and work in a war plant and have that whole adventure and all. And so they were into the California thing. And many of the folks from Butterfield, but Butterfield's a tiny town, 125 people when all the dogs are home. And a lot of the people who lived there that were working age didn't have jobs, and so when they heard about the war plants, they all went to California. Some of them stayed out there. And so my mother decided she would come back to California with me, and she would visit with her friends who had stayed in California. And she was locking up the house, and the wind caught the door and hit her in the back, and that pain just bothered her all the way out there, and for weeks. And finally, her best friend from high school, who was the head nurse at the hospital, asked her to come and get an x-ray and see what was going on. And she had bone cancer, and it was way back before they had a treatment for melanoma, and she just died. I quit my job at the publishing house and came back with her. And I think she was maybe 2 weeks after we got back, she died. I went back to California, picked up where I left off, trying to play music, get a little job here and there. But then the arm. And then I had to find something else to do, and I didn't know what to do. And a friend that I had met in California who had moved back to her home in Utah said there was a job in a publishing house up there. So I went up there and got the job. I was there for about a year. And then my Aunt Juanita, who had taken me in after my folks died, and her husband were living in Marysville, north of Sacramento, he got kidney disease, and he was going to have to go on dialysis, and the closest dialysis in 1976 was San Francisco. He was going to have to drive 150 miles each way 3 times a week to get treated for a disease that was going to make him blind and not able to drive. We had to do something else. And so they called me, and we sat down, and I said, well, You can't do this. You want to live in San Francisco? No, God, no. How about if you just go home? Well, what'll you do? I said, well, I guess I'll go with you. Thinking, I'll get them settled, and I'll be right back. That was 1976. I never left. Well, okay, the bad arm. So I got a job throwing paper out. It's the only thing I could find to do that I could do. I was throwing the paper out. Everything was fine. I was maybe taking a class here and there and throwing my paper out. Everything was cool. One day, it was right before that Sunday before Thanksgiving, when all the ads come out in the papers. The paper weighs 40 pounds, And I did this over-the-car thing and hit my elbow right there where the scar is. And I just had to pull over and cry for a while. And then I came to myself, and I got the paper out finished, went back home right quick, because one of the things I did to make a living was sing at the Unity Church on Sundays, and I was about to be late. So I jump in the bathtub, take my bath, get my clothes on, reach in my pocket, and instead of my car keys, I find this card that this woman had given me weeks ago that wanted to sell me cosmetics, as if. I'm sorry, but I just don't go there. My head doesn't do that. Anyway, the other side of the card came up, and she was a vocational rehab counselor. And I turned to Pat and I said, I think there is a God. I'm pretty sure there is a God. So I went to church, I sang the song, I found the woman, I said, is this what you do? And she said, yes. I said, can I tell you a story? And she said, yes. And I told her about the arm. She said, come in tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. So I went in that Monday morning, and she had an appointment with an orthopedic surgeon to go find out what was the matter with my arm. So I went to the office. It was the same day. And I went to the office, and they took me in this room and stuck electrodes all the way from here to my fingertips. And they fired them one at a time to see which ones hurt. Not many did. The ones that did woke me up, but the guy said, boy, he says, it's a good thing that's your left hand, because otherwise you'd have trouble. I said, I'm left-handed. He said, you got trouble. So I know that. What am I going to do about it? And he said, well, go back and see your counselor. I went back to see her. She said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, what do you mean? She said, we're going to put you back through school. So what do you want to do? What do you want to be? I said, employable. And so I went back to MSU. I had all these English credits, but I couldn't use them for a major because they were more than 10 years old. And I only had barely a 2-point average, because that night at the party when I decided to go to California, I walked out of all my classes, never went back, never gave notice, never tried to take care of the incompletes. I was done. And I wasn't going to do music because I'd already been there. So I took English for my minor and got a degree in design and photography. Got a call from the West Plains Quill. They said, you want to come down? We got a couple of openings for photographer. You do any writing? I said, yeah, a little. Well, you might think about it. So I thought about it. It was time for me to go to my next semester, and there was a journalism class taught by Dale Freeman, who was the ace of all journalists. Now, I have to be honest here that way back when I was a young one and went to school for the first time, I took a journalism class from Dr. Was it Henniger? Julie Henniger's dad. Hennigan. There you go. He was about as interested in that class as I was. And I think he was waiting for his next cup of coffee and would just talk in between. I took other classes from him. He was a fine teacher, but he didn't care a bit about journalism, so I didn't either. And I thought, well, this is going to be boring, but okay, I need to find out. And Dale walked in, had a bunch of papers, and he starts to read about the future of journalism. He's firing these statistics out and these histories and this quote and that quote. I just grabbed my pen, started to write, taking notes for what I didn't know what it was about, but I thought I'd better keep it. Got to the end, he said, okay, I need 12 inches on that by tomorrow. And the kids just said, well, you didn't tell us to take notes. He said, welcome to the world. And I thought, I'm going to be okay with this guy. This is going to be all right. And then by the end of the next class, I knew that's what I wanted to do. That's what I could do to make a living, and I could stand it. And so I went down to West Plains and went to work for the Quill. I was there for 20 years. 5 before I ever knew that Dennis Kreider played a note on the guitar. He sat right next to me. 5 years. And one day he said, well, I guess we're going to go to Rick's tonight and play a little music. I said, what kind of music you play? He said, old time stuff. I said, well, I sing old time. He said, no. I said, yeah. He said, well, I guess you better go to Rick's. Well, I guess I better. So we'd sat down and we started to play, and I thought, oh, I have gotten to heaven without having to die. Because they were so good. They were just so good and just so offhand about it, you know. And it put me right back into the kind of music that I ran away from because I was trying to do folk music and rock and roll and all of those things. I'm going to shoot that phone. I'm not you, just the phone. Yeah. So it was from there that the movie happened, because they came back into town from a place that the locals called Collinsville, because everybody's last name was Collins there, and a lot of cousin to cousin communication there. But they were just a kind of a slow bunch. That whole little community there. They're slow, and real easy to offend. Mainly because they didn't understand what you were talking about. But they went out there because the murder that movie is based on. Daniel doesn't want me to tell you this, but I covered that movie. I took pictures of that body, by God. So I know where that story came from. And they went out there to that same neighborhood thinking they'd find the location for the movie. Somebody shot at them. Get out of here. So they're coming back in town, and somebody says, well, I wish we could hear some real Ozarks music. And so I said, well, aren't they playing at Rick's tonight? I think so. So they called us up. Can we come listen to you? We got these movie people with us. Okay. So they come in, all these little short people dressed in black. That was the only quote that the reporter from the Kansas City Star quoted me on. And I get a call the next morning from Jonathan. It says, Merideth, short little black dressed people. I didn't know what to say. He said, I have you know that I'm just as tall as you are. Yeah, I know, Jonathan. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. So they come and they listen to us, and we just learned this song. Well, the version we learned was a Gillian Welch song, but she, you know, as she does many times, she stole it. I mean, with respect, the song is from the 1500s, or possibly earlier. It originally was a song called The Trois Sisters, because that's how you said two back then, trois, the Trois Sisters. So then it just came up through the years, and it's all that's about the girl who fell in love with this boy, and her sister did too, and he fell in love with the sister, and he gave her a present, and the girl just couldn't stand it, so she killed her and threw her in the river. And years later, when it was just her bones, this young man who was a fiddle player came along and took her breastbone to make a fiddle tailpiece. And the only song that fiddle would play is, "Oh, the wind and the rain. Oh, the dreadful wind and rain." So we had worked that song up, and to the point where it would make you cry if I worked on it really hard. That's my main talent. I don't really sing. I just make you cry. Yeah, somebody over there is agreeing. Yes, she does. I'm sorry. I can't help it. So we had the song worked up. We said, well, we'll do this one for you. So we sang it. And I was sitting, they had a microphone in the middle of the room just to catch us a little bit. And I did this mean little trick, because microphones are fun. You can do sound effects with them if you're careful. And so they're singing this song about the dreadful wind and rain. And in between them, when they're doing the instrumentals, I'm over there going, "Oh, the dreadful wind and rain." So it charmed them. I mean, we meant to. And they left. And we thought it was pretty odd, and we wished them well and knew that with $2 million they weren't going to make much of a film, and it was about the Ozarks anyway, and what could it be? Did I say that sometimes I'm not very smart? I just didn't have a clue. 2 years later, almost to the day, 2 years later, they called and said, "You remember us? We're the film people that came through." And I said, "Yeah, I remember. We just can't get that one song out of our heads. Could you do that for the movie?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to record it for the movie." They said, "No, we have a little scene." No, wait a minute. I'm not an actor. I only play me. I said, "It'll be fine. All you have to do is sing." Okay, all right. So there it went from there. And then they decided that song, "Wind and Rain," was, the words really didn't fit the movie, and so they really couldn't use it. Could I fix it? Fix it. Sure. So I went back and wrote a song about the movie. You didn't bring your guitar, did you? No. It'll be okay. No, it's okay. I might. Acapulco, yeah. Well, so anyway, I wrote the song about the real situation, and it's a pretty good song. You think it's a pretty good song? Yeah, but it was too on the nose. It told too much of the story. And if they played it at the start, it would give away too much. If they played it at the end, they'd already heard the story. So it was farther along instead. We got it on the soundtrack. I have a few copies. And I shouldn't even tell you this. I shouldn't do it. Because on eBay, that same CD sells for $75 because it's out of print. But I have some. And I just sell them for the regular price because it's a good soundtrack CD. And nobody ought to have to pay $75 for it. But so that all happened. And then it just kept on going. After the movie got the Oscars, Lois Reborn called me. I sleep late, and so even though I knew the Oscars were going to be announced the next day, I thought, well, surely it'll be, 9 or 10 o'clock. Lois calls me at 6. She doesn't even say hello. She says, 4, you got 4. What are you talking about? Oscars. Wow, okay. So then they decided they had to do a national tour to support the soundtrack. And then we decided we ought to have something of our own to sell and not just the soundtrack. And so we'd run into the studio and started putting songs together. And then we went on tour. 12,000 miles 27 cities in 29 days. And all of us but one were senior citizens. And we were still speaking when we got back. It was close a couple of times, but it was okay. Poor Bo. Bo had to stay in a room with a fellow who had exactly the opposite sleep schedule that he did, and a short fuse. And there was one point there where they were just about to kill each other, and Van was going to get on the bus and go home, by God. And they come and said, Merideth, things are bad. So Bo came in and said, I don't know what to do. I said, well, Bo, the only thing you can do is tell him you're sorry. He said, I don't know what I'm sorry for. I said, doesn't matter. He won't hear anything else you say until you say, I'm sorry. So he goes out and he sits down and he says, well, Van, I'm sorry. Van says, oh, Bo, don't pay any attention to me. I get like that every once in a while. That was it. That was it.
Before that, he said, I ain't used to this travel. He said, I'm probably going to go off with somebody.
Then it was you.
He told me, he says, well, I was about to blow up with somebody, and I figured you'd take it better than everybody else.
Yeah, he had a hard time, but bless his heart, I tell you, I would give just nearly anything I have to be able to see the look on his face again when we came up over the top of the Cascade Mountains and it was snowing in May, and just these giant tall pillars of rock and the snow, and then there's the ocean. Just he'd never been out of Missouri before. And then we got to the redwoods, and I've got a picture of him. There's this redwood tree that's on the ground. It's got to be 8 feet from one side of it to the other. And he's standing on top of it in front of another redwood tree that's like this. It looks like a little leprechaun. There's a giant trees and little bitty Van. But that trip would have been worth it just to have the experience that everybody had, because my dad was all over the world. But when I was a kid, we were everywhere. We saw all kinds of things, and I come back to Missouri and try to talk about that world with people that have never been in place, and it's sad. It's sad, and I never could find a way to get that any less sad until we went on that tour, and that was we took them around. They got to play the Highline Ballroom in New York City. They got to play the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, right next to Duke Ellington's dressing room. Yeah. Played Vancouver, played Phoenix, played L.A., Hollywood forever. It was
There's a whole list right there. I brought the
oh God.
the tour poster there for you.
You ought to come up.
Say what?
Just pass it around. Yeah. Oh, I don't need the list. I remember it all. Oh. In fact, I told somebody before the show about our very first tour appearance at the High Dive in Denver.
Emphasis on that.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's one of those places where that people go to dance, and so they don't have very many seats. They had 7 chairs. We filled them. It wasn't standing room only because nobody else came. And we had to climb a little short ladder to get onto the stage, and you had to do that without touching the stage because it was very sticky with unknown, I don't know. And we had to borrow a broom and sweep it off because of all the beer cans and the trash and stuff. But that was the beginning of the tour, and we went from there to, let's see if I can just do this, to Salt Lake, to Boise, Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, San Francisco.
Arcadia, we did the house concert.
Yeah. House concert in Arcadia. I forgot about that. Okay, then Los Angeles, then Phoenix, and we were going to play Austin, but whoever booked the tour failed to notice that a motorcycle rally was going to happen there in that same area, and they had blocked off all the streets. We couldn't get to the venue. No, neither could anybody else. So Bo called Kitty, who was living there at the time. She said, "I'll get you a concert. Just come on over to the place." So we showed up, and then all these people showed up with food and money, and we played them some music, and I think you all played all night, didn't you?
Played into the evening, into the wee hours.
In the wee hours, yeah. And then we went on to Dallas and home and played the Old Time Festival in West Plains. Took off a week to kind of go, whew, and then started out again and did Nashville, Atlanta, Chapel Hill, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Boston, New York, Columbus, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, yeah.
I think we wrapped it up coming into
Was it Kansas City? Yeah.
What's the big,
I don't remember the place. I didn't remember anything except Gary Bradley showed up for the show, and I hadn't seen him since high school. That was kind of a big deal. Yeah. What a thing. What a thing to get to do that. You know, just to go and rent a 15-passenger van and put all your stuff, all of their stuff, all the music, all the instruments.
and nobody else could pack that van. Every time everybody else tried to, it'd be 3 or 4 things left. And I was the only one that had experience playing band Tetris with the equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was always somebody in that middle seat that had to sit on the edge of the seat. There was no armrest or anything. You either hang on or fall off. Yeah. We kind of had to take turns at that. So that all happened, and then the Jonathan Scheuer, who was the executive producer on Winter's Bone, and the husband of Deborah Granick, who was the director. He decided he liked us. He liked our music and thought we ought to do more. And he's been sending me checks every year. Do more. And we got all those back there. We got one coming out from Mary Alexander, who's back there at that back table. She was with me on the Front Porch album. And then we decided she did a good enough job, but she just ought to have an album of her own. So that's going to be introduced May 7th at the Washington Avenue Baptist Church, 3 o'clock. Be there. It'll be way fun. Admission is free, and it's all these wonderful guys playing behind her. And I'm singing behind her and loving to do so. So I could just wander on forever, you know. Questions? I know I didn't cover everything. What do you want to know?
Hey, Meredith, you mentioned Van Colbert.
Yes.
With Bo, and maybe Bo can explain this even better than my memory suggests. But there's a story about Van's first instrument that his dad gave him and helped build. Bo, you know that one? Well, his first banjo was made out of a stretched out, I think, a groundhog skin. That was his first banjo made, and just pieces of wood put together somehow. But Van is one of the, as you know, alluded to, he's one of the great old-timers, old-time music.
You know what makes him a real old-timer? Just a genuine hillbilly. He was born in the front seat of a pickup truck on the way to the hospital.
I was hoping you'd cover that.
So if we wanted to watch the movie, is it easy to get?
Fairly easy. It's sort of on and off Netflix. It comes on, and then it's on for a while, and then it's gone. But it's worth searching it out. It's a very good movie, And you'll say 2 or 3 times before the movie's over, I know that person. And that's my neighbor, yeah.
I'm related to that person.
Yeah. Well, the very last night of the festival season, and we went everywhere. I mean, I went to Italy, for God's sake, to the Torino International Film Festival, because they didn't have anybody else. It was a very small company, and Deborah had to go to the Gotham Festival that same night, and so she wasn't going to go to Italy, and I'll do it. They sent Jonathan with me because both of us have ADD really bad, and she said she figured that was the only way to keep us out of the street was to send both of us. It didn't work. It did not work. 2:30 in the morning, we're on this street where Jonathan swears there was this legendary gay bar in the 1950s. He wanted to find out if it was still there, and he wanted to take pictures. And we found it. We drank way too much beer to remember to take pictures. Went back the next night, not realizing that when they closed the businesses there, they just rolled down a garage door and put a padlock on the bottom, and it's gone. You know, there's no sign, there's no anything. So 2:30 in the morning, we've walked way past where it could have been. We don't have any idea where we are or how to get back. Then there's nobody out there, you know, a few cats. And he's leaning against the lamppost with his little fedora tipped back and his glasses down on his nose, trying to read the map of the city, trying to figure out where the hell we were. Yeah. About that time, a train whistle sounded, and we thought, wait a minute, the end of the train tracks are beside our hotel. We just had to follow the train. So we did, and about 2 hours later, it was a great experience. Anyway, I wandered off again, Bo.
When we're playing these shows, she always holds forth, tells a little story, and we have no idea what was going to come out of her mouth.
I didn't either.
And sometimes it was, I mean, she had them just falling out of their chairs laughing, and other times it was jaw hitting the table. It was, I can't believe she said that.
Okay, can we do Jesus and the aliens? Let's just do that.
Yeah, this was at the Ozark Folk Center, a very, very elderly conservative crowd in that audience, and it was a packed house, and she tells this joke.
I don't remember what sent me down that road, but I had heard this story, and it cracked me up so bad. And then I thought, well, you know, as funny as I think that is, everybody would think that's funny, surely. You know, well, so these aliens land, and they're just the nicest people, and they're real personable and friendly and jovial, and you know, the word gets out that these are just kind of amazing people. And so the Pope decides that he wants to meet these folks, and so they make an arrangement, and they have them all in a little conference room, and the Pope says, "Well, it's quite an honor to meet you, but," he said, "I have to ask you, do you know Jesus?" And the guy says, "Jesus? Oh, yeah, we know Jesus. He comes around just nearly every year. He comes around. We have big parties. We throw big dinners for him and everything. He is the funniest guy. I mean, you know, and he's so kind. It's just he's, yeah, you know how he is." Pope says, "Well," says, he never was like that with us." And they said, well, I said, "You know, I bet it was the chocolate, because he loves chocolate. He loves chocolate. Every time he comes, we fix a big, and all these desserts, all of them with chocolate and everything, and have these big parties." And I says, "Why? What did you all do?"
You could hear the jaws dropping at that.
I couldn't help it. So, questions around? I know I didn't cover everything. Yeah.
What's your plans for the rest of your long life?
Oh, Lord.
Repeat the question.
So what was your plans for the rest of your long life?
To get done. to get done. I've got 3 or 4 writing projects and a song, 2 songs that I'm not finished with. I need to, and the book projects, I could say a little about that. One is this novel that I wrote that turned into 2 books, and then now it's in the process of turning into 3 books because I realized after I finished the 2nd book that it's actually the 3rd, and there's a big piece in the middle there that I never covered. And so I'm in the process of writing that. And then there's Dolphin Island, about which I have probably 1,000 pages of notes, but I've not put it together yet. And it's a hell of a story. I mean, but the problem is it all happened 1500 BC. So I'm going to have to make up a true story. I know all the elements of it, but it's just, there's nobody you can ask except old Indian people, and they just grin at you. Say, yeah, we know that story. Not going to tell you. Yeah.
I may have this wrong, but might just get you to elaborate a little more on The Winter's Bone, how they, filmed that movie with probably most of them not having any idea. But were you the one that taught them how to skin a squirrel? Or
No, I wasn't. Actually, the little girl showed them how to skin it. Yeah, because she lived in that house. She was just they grabbed her up because she kept stepping in and saying, aren't you going to do this? And that's not how you do that. You do that. She was very, very handy.
Tell them about the wardrobing.
Oh, yeah. Well, I said, what am I, do I have to have a costume? Or they said, no, just wear something you wouldn't wear to town. I thought, I don't have anything I wouldn't wear to town. But it was there was a big semi-trailer, a whole line of semi-trailers down this country road, middle of nowhere, no lights anywhere except for the generators. And there was a trailer that was the wardrobe. There was a trailer that was the bathrooms. A trailer that was the dressing rooms. A trailer that was the office. And several others. And then this giant generator that they had to run from a cable way down the hollow so it wouldn't pick up on their microphones. And we worked until, what was it? I guess it was midnight. They decided they had to break because they'd worked, the union said they'd worked long enough. So they had to stop and bring in a whole bunch of pizzas. Everybody ate pizza. So started back up again. And then about 3:30, a catering truck came down from Springfield and fed us all pasta and espresso and desserts and middle of nowhere. Kitty.
You were telling me about that they shipped in all these, plaid shirts and new jeans, Carhartts and all that stuff from New York for everybody wearing. They looked at it and said, nobody wears that. So they went around to all the neighbors and said, give us your old wore out stuff for these people to wear.
They bought clothes out of people's closet. And in places where it was appropriate, they traded them the new clothes for the ones in their closet. So, yeah.
Wow. I'm sorry I wasn't here, and thank you, Mike Smith, for taking over for me. I actually thought it started at 6:30. I've been here at 6 every month for the last year, but for some reason, I'm sorry. But let's give a fine welcome and goodbye, and thank you to Marideth Sisco.
You're quite welcome. So is there anything I didn't cover? Anything you're curious about that I didn't cover? My God, I've not ever done that good a job. Yeah.
Drew.
In 2016, you lost a dear friend of yours, Roger Buffington. At his funeral, you gave an amazing eulogy. You told some amazing stories. I wonder if you could recall a story about you two him driving, I want to say in a Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
recount that story? I think most would love that.
Drew wants to hear a story of, tell me again. I was late.
It's, well, here's the thing. The story is about Roger Buffington, who was a friend of mine forever. We knew each other in college and knew at that point in time that we were going to know each other forever. And so we made a pact. I was going west and he wasn't. And so we made an agreement that whichever one of us went first would find some way to let the other one know that it was okay, if it was okay. So we're out. We decide that Roger has found out where Jimmy Driftwood's barn is. He says, we got to go. We just got to go. So this is like on a Friday evening, and he has to be at work at the auto parts store the next morning, and it's way the hell down Mountain View, Arkansas. You know how far that is? But we went in his Volkswagen. He rode in the back. I drove. He rode in the back seat with his 12-string, and we sang all the way. And then we discovered when we got there to Jimmy's barn that he wasn't there, but everybody else was in his barn. But they actually played up in the loft, so you had to climb up in the loft and pass your instrument up, and so we did it, and we got done about 4, and then realized that we had to just bust it to get back to Springfield, and we jump in the Volkswagen. This time he's driving. We go down the road just as fast as we can go, fast as we can go. The road comes to a T. It's not marked. There's a bluff on the other side of the T. And he made this sound that was sort of like a and he may have closed his eyes, but he just spun that wheel. And that Volkswagen went into a slide, and then shot down the road in the right direction. And we got there on time. Bye.
Well, we are running out of time. I'm sorry. I wish we could sit and listen to her all night long, couldn't
And
we?
I could talk all night long, yeah.
We would love it. You can talk anytime you want. Thank you.